Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to the first episode of Talking Tracks, a brand new show brought to you by The Record Room with the sole focus of soundtracks on vinyl. Maybe I'll feature the occasional cassette when they do pop up, but the main crux will always be soundtracks on vinyl. And if you've been watching The Record Room for the past couple of months, you'll know that I'm a big soundtrack fan. As I've said before, what you can see behind me, this is a portion of my soundtracks on vinyl collection. And well, me as a day job, unfortunately I don't just get to host The Record Room, I also work for a soundtrack label as well as co-running a soundtrack label as well. But I'll talk a little bit about that further down the line. Ever since I've been a kid, I have been in love with film music. There's no kind of easy way to say it. You know, ever since starting to watch musicals with my grandmother as a small child, I kind of fell in love with music and songs in films. And then right around 1989, when Danny Elfman's score for Batman came out, well, that was it for me. You know, I left the theatre that day not only wanting to be Batman, but also to hear Elfman's music again. The way he could inject almost like an extra character, give Batman something else with his score, just absolutely blew me away. And from that point I've been buying soundtracks on vinyl and CD, and primarily just vinyl now. I got rid of a lot of my CDs a long time ago, but I know you guys out there are fans of the film music. Most of you, I'm guessing, are former listeners of The Damn Fine Cast, the soundtrack podcast I hosted many moons ago for quite a while. And if you're not familiar with that, we'll jump over on iTunes and the places you find podcasts and check out some awesome soundtrack stuff. You know, it was kind of like a radio show where I'd talk about songs and I'd play them as well. So it wasn't just you know, oh, I like this record, you should like it. No. We actually went a little bit deeper and actually gave you some kind of insight and what the actual song sounded like. And weirdly enough, you know, my love of film music really does start with Danny Elfman's Batman. And it's kind of apropos then that my first selection on the debut episode of Talking Tracks is none other than the score for Joker, Hilda Gudnadottir's Oscar-winning score for Joker. And this is actually a new addition for me. I only got this maybe a week and a half ago as of recording this. And it's not that I didn't think the score was fantastic. Ever since I saw the film, I've just, you know, I fell in love with it. And it's probably the first time in a long time where I've actually thought the Academy Award for Best Score went to the best score. Not that, you know, not that that really means anything, but still I thought, you know, congratulations to Hilda. I really hope she goes on to some, you know, really huge things. The only reason I hadn't picked this up before was how dang expensive it was. This is a single disc LP. I looked to buy this when it first came out and it was like £45. It was something insane like that. And I just thought, you know, I like it, but come on now, this is a single disc LP. You know, even as an import, I thought it was a little bit too much. However, I recently celebrated a birthday, was given an Amazon gift card and thought, oh, okay, fair enough, I'll check out what's on there. I managed to find Joker for under £20. So for me, I was like, that's a no-brainer. I have to have that. And as I said, it's a single disc. It has 17 tracks on it. And it's kind of all you need. I think if there were an expanded version of this, because I'm sure there probably was some more music available, and there may be a 2-disc version at some point, but this is a solid listen. You know, from start to finish, you get everything you want. And that's what I like about it. I'm happy that a lot of these deluxe releases do come out with, you know, with kind of like the extended or the bonus cuts, but honestly, sometimes you don't need them. Sometimes what's on the record, that's the soundtrack album, or that's the score. And for Joker, I love this. It's very simple, fantastic cover image. I mean, if you've seen the film, you'll know exactly what this is. If you haven't seen the film, I urge you to do so because it is fantastic. But it's a very simple, bare bones package, and I, for one, am all for it. You get a nice image of Joaquin Phoenix as Joker there on the front, and you do on the back as well. And the album does come with a nice 12x12 insert. Again, nice picture of Joaquin Phoenix there, painting himself up as the Joker. And then on the back, you get some credits. Nice and simple, straightforward, how I like things to be. And this version, there are a couple of different versions. In fact, I think there's 3. I believe there is a picture disc, one on a kind of clear splatter, and the one I have here, which I'm assuming this is just the standard retail version, but for me, this is actually the version I would have picked because this comes on this killer purple vinyl. And I've already listened to it and it sounds fantastic. Water Tower really have done a really good job on this pressing. Nice, super simple, and for me, you know, around £20, that's what I'd expect to pay for something like that. You know, I'm all for spending more on something deluxe, and I've got something deluxe at the end of the episode, which I paid a fair bit for, but I believe that it's worth the money because when you look at it as a whole, it's like, oh, well, that's impressive. But Joker, it's an amazing score. It's a very thought-provoking, emotional, melancholy score. It really does highlight the kind of the plight of Phoenix's character in the film, how he gets to the point of being Joker. And if you've yet to hear it, jump online. It's available now on all DSPs, or if you just want to take the plunge, have a look around online. As I say, it's come down a bit in price, I'm guessing because it's a little bit older now, but definitely this should be in every soundtrack fan's collection. Much like the standard episodes of The Record Room, of which, you know, I will still be featuring soundtracks every now and again. Talking Tracks isn't designed to be a every other week kind of a show. It's just going to be when I get some new soundtrack stuff in, when I've got something to talk about. And over the life of this show, I plan to do some deep dives on certain albums because there are certain scores where I own more than one copy, you know, some from different countries, different versions, different variants, different editions, that kind of thing. So if you're into that, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or pledge to us on Patreon to make sure you never miss an episode. And my next pick, this is something I literally have no reason why I haven't owned this album for 20 years. None whatsoever. The album was released in the year 2000, but I picked it up a couple of months ago. And it's my own silly fault. It's just something that I kind of flew under the radar. I don't know why I didn't need it. I don't know why I didn't have it, because I did need it, and upon buying it, it kind of became really apparent to me how great this record is. And this is the Dagger Red. It's not a reissue because it was never on vinyl before, so this is the first time on vinyl, but this is the Dagger Red release of Il Gatto e Nove Code, or Cat o' Nine Tails. I'm sure I've butchered the Italian title, but it's the Dario Argento film, his second movie, Cat o' Nine Tails by the legend Ennio Morricone. And the version I have here, this version has seen better days. I will say that. The cover is somewhat beat up, but I actually got this for £12, which is like 15 bucks, and it comes with the original poster insert, and the vinyl is virtually mint. So whoever had this just hadn't stored it in any kind of protection, so it's got some ring wear. But you know, at the end of the day, as much as I like to have a mint cover, I can't play the cover. I'm listening to the record, so as long as the record sounds good, I will grab something if it's cheap, if it's something I want in my collection, and you know, maybe one day I will upgrade. But as far as the actual package is concerned, I think this is a really weird cover. I think it's a very, very strange cover. If you've not seen the film, it probably looks even weirder. If you've seen the film, this image kind of makes sense, but the actual poster for the film, or the key art, is this fantastic illustration of a cat's face, and a young woman kind of being strangled, which, I mean, it sounds horrific because it is, but, you know, as an image, it's really striking. And they chose to do that for the cover, so I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But this album has kind of become more famous in recent times for the track Paranoia Prima, which was used in Death Proof. I almost said Death Note there. Death Proof by from Quentin Tarantino. It's on, I believe it's on that soundtrack as well. This is Morricone. This is the era of Morricone I liked, kind of mid to late 70s. He was really doing some wild and far out experimentation at this point, and there's some really neat stuff on this album. If you haven't picked this one up yet, I mean, like I say, it was released in 2000, so it's 20 years old now, but you can still find it kind of fairly reasonable, I will say. For a nice copy, you will pay a little bit more money, but it's a pretty decent album. It's a single disc, but it does come in a really nice gatefold with a ton of information. about the film, and some nice shots. There's some lobby cards and some posters on the inside, which is very, very cool. And Daggerhead back in the day, they used to put posters inside their releases, and a lot of these posters for some reason have gone missing. You rarely see Daggerhead issues from back in the day that still have their posters, and it's easy to see why, because how cool is this? I'm going to try and fit all this in. That's the actual kind of, I believe they called them day bills, poster for the film. So I mean, it's the kind of thing, it would look great in a frame, it really would. So yeah, I can kind of understand why not every version has its poster, but you get that. And then the album itself comes on 180 gram black vinyl. It's just a very big, thick slab of black wax. And I'm not 100% sure if this has been reissued by anybody else. There's a good chance it probably has, but when I was hunting around to grab a copy, I usually just look for the original version, and that was the original version. I'm sure it came out in the year 2000, but that was the first time it was ever available on vinyl. And if you're lacking some Morricone from the early Argento scores, I would highly recommend Cat O' Nine Tails. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. Kind of staying Italian-ish, but not at all at the same time, because many, many moons ago, there was a film called Dawn of the Dead, and as most people know, it's a George A. Romero film, but the European version, namely the Italian version, was produced, well, the film itself was produced by Dario Argento. And then in Italy, Argento did his own version of the film. I think he cut around 8 or 10 minutes, something along those lines. I mean, Dawn of the Dead is a long film. And Argento made some cuts to the film to make it, you know, just run a little bit quicker, run a little bit smoother. And I love the film in all of its forms. I have many DVDs, many VHS. So I'm just a big fan of the film, but I do like the Argento cut. It seems more like an action movie. And for the Argento score, obviously, I'm sure most of you out there know, Goblin recorded the score for his film. And I'm not 100%, but I think there's like 99% of the music in the Argento cut of Dawn of the Dead is the Goblin score. Well, for George Romero's version, he only used, I think it's 3 tracks from Goblin, and the rest of his score was made up from library music from the DeWolf library catalogue. And for the longest time, they were just, you know, kind of odd cuts on different library records. And then Johnny Trunk, being the legend he is, released this. And this album is essentially, I don't know if it's all of it, but it's a fair chunk of it. I think this also came out in like 2004, 2005. This is, the album is called, the album has a really super long name, Unreleased Soundtrack Music from George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. And this is the bulk of the library music used by George Romero in Dawn of the Dead. And it's fantastic. This to me is, now I have this and the Goblin score, to me it's like, well, now I've got the best of both worlds. I can listen to 2 different versions almost of the Dawn of the Dead score, or I can listen to both of them together and just go buck wild. This now, you know, this version, I picked this up maybe a month or so ago, and I've been kicking myself for not having this for a long time, because this is really starting to creep up in price now. If you can find this for £50 or less, I would say jump on it, because it's a really collectible album. I think it's either 300 or 500 copies. I believe it's 500 copies. It was released on CD as well, but the vinyl is becoming really hard to find, and hard to find in good shape as well. I mean, as I mentioned before, cover shape, sure, I like things to be mint, but for me, it really does come down to what's the condition of the wax, and, you know, does it sound good? And this one does have a corner crease and some dings here and there, but, you know, it doesn't really bother me on an album that's 16 years old. You know, wear and tear is going to happen. But the wax plays absolutely fantastic. And hearing some of these songs is just like, whoa. I mean, he knew what he was doing when he was putting this score together, because it really, really works. And this is something I would recommend to like all horror soundtrack fans out there. If you're not even aware of this album, because that, you know, that happens. I find stuff all the time. I'm not the be all and end all of soundtracks. I'm constantly discovering stuff. I discovered this way after the fact of it being released, which is why I've only just bought a copy. But I'd highly recommend this to any Romero fan that's missing this. I would say, you know, kind of if you have to save up for it for a little bit, do it. It's worth it. You'll really enjoy it. The album is very bare bones. On the back there are some liner notes, and the vinyl itself, it just comes on black wax. And I also just purchased a bunch of these they're not specials. Well, I'll tell you, these sleeves. So inner sleeves, let's talk about inner sleeves. Just divert for a second. So inner sleeves, most inner sleeves these days will be polylined to cut down on static, which is awesome. But there are still tons of records out there that do not have poly sleeves. Because poly sleeves are expensive. So I have been replacing a ton of my albums with these sleeves. I believe it's a sheet of rice paper inside and an anti-static front and back. And you can find these online fairly easily. The Mofi sleeves, M-O-F-I, they are probably the most well-known brand, but you can get other brands for significantly less, like these ones. These, I got 50 of these for half the price of the Mofi ones, and they are identical in every single way. And they just, you know, they're just nice. They keep your records a little bit nicer. But it comes on black vinyl, and as I say, secondhand market is probably the only place you're going to find that now. But believe me when I say, when you talk about creating an atmosphere, Romero knew what he was doing when he picked those tracks for Dawn of the Dead. Now, as I mentioned on the last episode of The Record Room, I had something of a record collecting epiphany. And essentially what it boils down to is the Record Room is a set space. The room isn't getting any bigger. And so I have to really think about the content that goes into the record room. Yes, I have a ton of shelving, but most of it's full, so I don't really have a lot of room to bring in more stuff. So recently I've been going through and pulling some things out, things for me to sell, things for me to pass on to friends. And during that time, I've kind of built up a fund that I'm now using as my, well, it's time to buy the records or the bigger purchases that I've been holding off of, but things that I've wanted in my collection. And my next pick, this isn't something that's super expensive. In fact, it's come down in price ever since its reissue, but I've always wanted a copy because it's one of my favorite scores. It's one of those scores that I will try and find like every version of, because I'm just sick like that. I like to have a collection of a score. I don't know. So it's a record collector thing. I don't know. You guys will understand it. But this here is the original silver screen release of Hellraiser, and this came out at the time of the film's release. And the record itself, Hellraiser, or the score itself, was released, reissued a couple of years back by Lakeshore Records, and I'm happy to say that I was actually involved during that whole process of the Hellraiser reissues 1 and 2, and the first time ever of Hellraiser 3. So if you're in the market for Hellraiser, that would probably be the best way to grab a copy of the score. But this now, I lucked out on this. I actually picked this up on eBay, which is a place I don't normally buy records. I will just go straight to Discogs because I do get caught up in the chase sometimes, and I have overpaid numerous times for things. But this, I actually ended up getting this for around half of the usual selling price. So I was very, very happy with it. The description, it arrived in the description. It was described as, you know, the cover looks really cool, still has all 4 corners. They are pretty sharp. And the vinyl itself looks and sounds great. And, you know, it's weird to me they chose this image, knowing how iconic the poster is. I mean, obviously they didn't know that the poster for Hellraiser or the key art was going to be iconic at the time. Of course not. But I have to believe that someone must have looked at the original artwork but chose this. I don't know. I mean, Lakeshore used the original artwork, which is very cool because it looks badass, but I don't know, this is weird. It's like half the LP cover is having its skin pulled away, which is weird to me. I just don't get it. And kind of on the back, you have these images of the Cenobites and some other bits and pieces, but you know, a typical mid-80s print job where some of the print's a little bit blurry, where they were just churning these things out. And I really don't know the kind of the pressing number on a record like this from back in the day. What is this, 86, 87? Something like that, but 87. I mean, Christopher Young's score is just iconic in the world of horror soundtracks. If you go to any kind of website and type in, or if you go into like a Google and you look for the best horror scores ever, you know, you're going to find things that you will expect. You know, Jaws, The Exorcist, you know, Profondo Rosso, Suspiria, depending on how good the list is. But Hellraiser will always be there. It will just always be there because it's symphonic, melodic, terrifying, delicious, lush, full. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful score. And if for some reason you've never heard Hellraiser, let me do you a favor. Go and check out Hellraiser right now. In fact, stop watching this, go and check out Hellraiser, and then while you're there, listen to Hellraiser 2 as well. Christopher Young absolutely nailed it on all fronts on both of those scores. And even though the original score for Hellraiser, created by Coil, was never used, and personally, I think it's okay, but I do prefer the Christopher Young score. I really do. You know, the Coil one is cool, but for me, it's Christopher Young all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. And as I said, this comes, I mean, they didn't really do coloured vinyl back then, but I do like the old silver screen labels where they used the film logo, which, you know, you don't see that much anymore. For me, this is just a neat thing. And also, you know, this being a UK pressing and me being a Brit, I like this kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that, you know, makes me smile. It appeals to me. And as I said, I got a good deal on it, so this is now going to be filed away with the numerous other copies of Hellraiser I own. Now, I want you to get comfortable for this part because this is, there's a tale to go along with this. So get yourself comfortable, maybe get yourself a beverage and put your feet up. I've been buying records now for well over 30 years, but that does not mean in any way, shape or form I am an expert on buying records. It simply comes down to show me something, if I like it, I'll buy it. Buying records on the internet though has kind of made that a little trickier. And especially buying on sites like Discogs, because the images used on Discogs aren't necessarily the images of the actual product you are going to get. Sure, you can ask buyers for images, especially if it's more of a big ticket item, and I always do that. If it's anything over £20, I will usually ask for a picture. Not, you know, I'm not being a dick, it's just I want to make sure it's what I'm looking for. And as I said, I've been kind of selling off some things, so I have a fund of money that I can now buy some of the bigger items I wanted. And so I was on Discogs looking for a specific album, in fact the album I'm about to talk about. And I came across a copy that was described as in mint condition and was an archival copy. Now, it is possible to come across archival copies, and essentially what an archival copy will be is when a pressing plant or a label make a certain record, they will keep copies on hand for promotional uses, or, you know, just to have kind of a catalogue of these are the things we've released. And, you know, on older albums, these things, if a plant is shut down or a label is folded, these things do end up in the wild. I've seen them with my own eyes before, so I know they kind of exist. So when I saw a copy of this record and it was labelled as an archival copy, and it was expensive, but it wasn't super expensive, I thought, well, do I take a chance on this? And I reached out to the seller, and he was a very, very lovely chap over in Italy. And I said, can you send me some pictures of it? And he was very enthusiastic. He's like, yeah, I came across this, and, you know, I got this record, and it looks so cool. And he sent me the pictures, and I was blown away. Considering the amount he was asking, I just thought, wow, I found the deal of the century here. And the album in question is Manhattan Baby by Fabio Frizzi, and I am a huge Frizzi fan. Probably next to Jerry Goldsmith, he is my favourite composer, certainly my favourite Italian composer. And when this arrived, I thought, wow, that's, you know, that is really amazing. There's a slight kind of crease or indentation in the top, but other than that, the cover was just It was so good. And then, you know, I looked at it. When it arrived, I kind of opened it, but I was in the middle of doing other things. So I opened it and I kind of marveled and I was like, wow, this is great. And I just put it in the record room and I went about my business. And then I think the next day I came back and I looked at it and I just thought, there's something not right here about this particular record, because I have other records released on this label. It was released on the Beat label. And the original versions I have, they all have a matte cover, all of them. And I don't know if you can tell on this, but this one is so super glossy. It's like it was literally printed yesterday. It's so unbelievably clean. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but the spine is so straight. And a record that came out in 1982 it literally should not look like this, unless it was kept in an archive somewhere from the day that it was printed. So I looked at it and I was kind of skeptical, to say the least. And then somebody on my Instagram, I posted a picture of it on my Instagram, and then somebody commented about duplicate versions going around. And I thought, oh, maybe, what's happened here? So I private messaged the gentleman, I think his name is Luca. I private messaged him and I said, how do you know? Like, what's the story behind it? And essentially what he told me was that somebody somewhere, I don't know who, I don't know why, but they were taking original albums, so real vinyl from back in '82, and reprinting covers. But obviously whoever did it made the covers look too good. For a start, they're gloss covers instead of being matte, which is, you know, kind of, that's a dead giveaway. Also, they smell different, which I know is kind of a weird thing, but it's the truth. And so essentially what I figured out with the help of Luca was that I had an original album, which I will show you here. And this does look in every way original. It even has, and I don't know if you can see this, but it has, I believe it's the SIAE stamp, which you'll find on a lot of original Italian records. I think it's just like a tax stamp to say that, you know, it's been purchased or it's available for purchase. So the record itself, I mean, the run out groove, everything about it screams originality. And after speaking with Luca, we kind of come to the conclusion that the copy I have an original album with a duplicate sleeve. And I don't necessarily want to call this a bootleg, because it's not. This is more of a Frankenstein, where someone's taken, you know, a new sleeve and put an original record in it. Now, why that would happen, I don't know. I mean, records from 1982, I guess the covers could have deteriorated quite badly. I have other records from the same label that are earlier, and the covers are fine, but I don't know, maybe there was an issue with the covers for Manhattan Baby. Anyway, I reached out to the seller and I explained the situation to him and said I was very unhappy that I'd essentially been sold, you know, kind of a counterfeit. And, you know, what could he, you know, could he shed any light on this? And it turns out kind of, he was very apologetic about the whole thing. And I worked out a deal with him where I got to keep the record, but I also got most of my money back. And it turns out that he had actually bought a few of them from some dealer who assured him that they were, you know, archival copies, but that, you know, that isn't the case now. And I believed him when he said that he didn't really, you know, he wasn't aware. He was a little bit suspicious, but didn't decide to go anywhere with it. But after all this had happened, I went back onto Discogs to look and see the other copies that were for sale, and every single one of them was listed as mint, archival, with a perfect cover. So, if you are in the market for a copy of Manhattan Baby, I would, for the time being, avoid going on Discogs, because it seems the only copies available on there are these archival finds, which they are not. They are original LPs, at least as far as I know, but the covers have been reprinted. So needless to say, I am still on the lookout now for an original version, which, yeah, I'm going to end up with 2 versions of this now because I don't know if anyone else is going to want this. Maybe I'll offer it up to sale when I find an original and just be honest about it and try and get back what I paid for it, which again, as I said, I did get a fair amount of the money refunded. So it hasn't cost me a ton. It's just, I have an original LP now with a not original cover, which I don't know who wants that. But anyway, it just goes to show that even after 30 plus years of collecting, things still happen. Okay, we're coming to the end of the first episode of Talking Tracks, brought to you by The Record Room. So I want to say thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you with me and for me to spend my time talking to you about some of my favorite records. If you are on social media, please do give us a follow. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Record Room Show. We're trying to cover as many bases as humanly possible. And if you are watching on YouTube, be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and if you'd hit that big red subscribe button, that would truly make my day. If, however, though, you enjoyed the show so much that you would like to support us and catch up with everything we're doing up front, just click the link in the video and you'll be able to go straight to our Patreon, and for only $1 per month, you get all of our episodes up front. You get to ask me questions directly, take part in viewer polls, and all other types of shenanigans. And for $1, I think that is pretty good value. Now, as I said earlier on, I did recently celebrate another turn around the sun. And with that, I decided to buy myself a birthday present. And it's something I wanted for a little while. I'd seen some people posting it around online, but to be honest with you, it was fairly expensive for a new release. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy it. And then lo and behold, when I went to buy it, I couldn't find it anywhere. It seems that it was sold out every place I looked. Anyway, I did find a copy in the end, and weirdly enough, I found it cheaper than everywhere I had seen it advertised. So sometimes it really does pay to look around, but the set or the record in question is the Final Fantasy VII remake and original scores. And these aren't complete scores, these are made up of tracks from the soundtrack. I don't even know how much of that you can get, but essentially what you get here is this is an outer slipcase that has Final Fantasy VII remake and Final Fantasy VII vinyl on the front in a nice kind of like silver foil. And then on the back, you get the nice Final Fantasy logo. Again, I'm not quite sure, can you see that? I think you can see that. But again, this is just a slipcase for it. And I will say this now, this set I paid £60 for, which is probably $75, $70, something like that. And that's around, I think I've seen it going for about £75, which, considering it's only a double LP, that is kind of insanely expensive. However, there are certain things that are worth paying for, and I believe this is one of them. So you get the outer cover, or the outer, whatever you call this, sleeve. So I'll just take this off. And then this is the album. And again, this is a very shiny record. And what this is a fold out. It's a trifold. And when you fold the album out, and this does help if you are a fan of the game. You don't have to be a fan to enjoy the music, but if you're a fan of the game, the fold out will really kind of make sense. When you fold the album out, you get this really cool, and I'm not going to be able to show this all on camera, you get this really cool silver fold out. But what this silver fold out is, this is Cloud Strife, which is the main character in the game. This is his sword. This is what his sword looks like. This is where his materia goes. And it's just super cool because it's also textured as well, like his sword in the game looks. It looks textured. And when you run your finger over it, you can actually feel the texture. I mean, it's so incredibly well done. And then it folds up into this really nice package. And this is one sturdy package, I will say that. When you open up the inside, I've already taken the discs out, so you get a housing for the discs, and then in the center you have the track listing for both albums, and you also get, which I found to be a very nice touch, you also get a black piece or a black sheet to put over the center, so none of the ink rubs, which I thought was very cool. So I am one of those crazy people that does take their albums out of their housing most of the time just to stop ring wear. I'm not sure you would get ring wear on something like this, but for the ease of not having to keep folding it out every time, I've taken them out. But the records do sit inside of here, and some people probably will avoid buying this purely because of the fact that the albums are picture discs. They're not standard albums. They are picture discs, and I know some people have an issue with picture discs. Me personally, I really don't. I love picture discs. I think they're really cool. Yes, they don't sound as great as regular vinyl, but then I could argue that some splatter variants sound like absolute garbage compared to regular black vinyl. But beggars can't be choosers in this case, because the only way you're going to get this is on picture disc, unless they decide to release it a different way, and I really don't think they're going to do that. But, the picture discs are cool, and I'll show you why they're cool. And again, got my nice sleeves. So the albums, the first disc is the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which, if there are any other gamers out there, let me just say, I'm working my way through it right now, and a few times there has been a lump in my throat. It's absolutely amazing. So here is the remake disc. So you have Cloud on the A side and Sephiroth on the B side. And I'm not giving anything away there. Sephiroth is the antagonist in the game. So you Cloud one side, Sephiroth the other. And that is the remake. And this includes graphics of taken from the remake. So it's kind of what the game looks like. And what's super cool about this is the music for the remake is updated versions of the original, but they've made them super orchestral, and the original score is fantastic in its own right, but the remake score, sweet Christmas. It is so good and so epic in every way. But, so the original score for Final Fantasy VII is the other disc, and this is the Cloud side. And this is the Sephiroth side. Now, I don't know if you can see, but the Sephiroth side is obviously, it looks different, but the Cloud side, it's the exact same image using the original PlayStation graphics. I think that's so cool. In fact, I'm going to attempt to do a side-by-side comparison and hope that I don't drop either of these albums. So, right. No, I'm not going to be able to do this actually. I've just figured that out. So, let me try. Can I do that? Dun, dun, dun. Let's see here. I need a co-host. There we go. So I don't know if you can quite see there, but you've got Cloud from the remake and Cloud from the original there. And the B-sides are different. It's Sephiroth on the B-side of both albums and Cloud on the front. But, you know, as packaging goes, I've mentioned before, I do like fancy packaging, but for me, it's always been about what's in the grooves. It always will be about what's in the grooves. It's always going to be music first for me. And as picture discs go, yeah, they sound like picture discs. Does that mean they sound bad? No, it doesn't. Once it gets going, believe me, it sounds as good as anything else. So, I couldn't be more happy with this set. It's a little bit more expensive, but I really do feel like you get your money's worth when you buy it. Well, there you have it, folks. The first episode of Talking Tracks is done. I'm not quite sure when the next episode will be coming, but I do already have a very interesting idea for it, where I'm going to take a deep dive on one album and look at various different versions from around the world, and also figure out which version actually sounds the best. So be sure to stay tuned to our social media to find out when episode 2 drops. And of course, being a patron will be the easiest and quickest way you will find out. The Record Room will return next week for episode 7. And until then, stay gold, spin those blackest circles, and remember, always wash your hands.